Number 1.
He had lived in a semi-detached house in Farnley Road, South Norwood near Crystal Palace Football Ground, about 2 miles away from where his body was found in a weed-covered plot that had formerly been the garden of the old vicarage of St. James Church in Croydon. The old vicarage was also noted as being only 300 yards from Miles Valent's school. His body was found by a man who was described as of no fixed abode as well as a vagrant type. Following the discovery of the body, the man remained at Croydon Police Station for the night, in case he was wanted by the police for further assistance. Miles Valent's body was fully clothed when found. Miles Valent was described as a colored boy, his father being Indian and his mother English. He had left home at about 2 p.m. on Thursday, 27 August 1959, to look at bicycles in shops in Croydon to choose one for his 12th birthday. His mother said, "He asked me after lunch if he could go and look at some bicycles in Croydon. He left home with 10D in his pocket to catch a bus. I told him to bring some pamphlets on bicycles home and not to be back later than 4.30. It was said that, when he had left the bicycle shops to go home, that he had had 2 pamphlets about bicycles on him, but when he was found they were not on his person." Miles Valent's mother said that after Miles Valent failed to return home, that she informed the police. The timeline of known events was 27 August. Miles Valent had been swimming earlier in the morning, and later went home for lunch. Between 1 to 2 p.m. 27 August, Miles Valent left home. He was seen leave by his mother, but also seen at that time outside his house by a 12-year-old school friend. Soon after 2 p.m. 27 August, Miles Valent was seen at a cycle shop in London Road, Croydon, where he stayed for about 20 minutes looking at bicycles. Sometime on 27 August, Miles Valent was seen by a woman in her shop in White Horse Road looking at some catalogues. 3:15 p.m. 27 August, Miles Valent was seen in a third bicycle dealer's in London Road. The owner said that he remembered Miles Valent calling because he was extremely polite, which is always unusual. 4 p.m. 27 August, a woman with a hardware shop in White Horse Road said that a boy that looked like Miles Valent bought some washing line from her shop for a man who stood outside. 5 p.m. 27 August, it was thought that Miles Valent was seen in a cafe near to the site of the old vicarage where he was found. 8 p.m. to midnight 27 August, it was thought that Miles Valent had been murdered between 8 p.m. and midnight. 7:30 a.m. 28 August, shortly after dawn, Miles Valent's body was found by a vagrant in the grounds of the old vicarage. The medical evidence suggested that he had been murdered between 8 p.m. and midnight. It was noted that Tavistock Road was frequented by many people until late at night, and pedestrians there were later stopped to see whether they remembered anything. It was also thought that he had been seen in a cafe a few yards away from where his body was found at about 5 p.m. Following the discovery of his body, the police cordoned off Tavistock Road, allowing only people that had legitimate reason for access to enter in their search for clues. An on-the-spot examination of Miles Valent's body was made by the pathologist before his body was taken away. The pathologist later said at the inquest, at the place where the body was found there was no sign of the material that had been used. The only evidence was the impression on the neck. There was the clearest possible evidence of asphyxia. It was also reported that Miles Valent had died from gentle strangulation. It was said that the temperature of his body, when it was found, was 96 degrees, which it was noted was only 2 degrees below the normal temperature of a living person. It was added that it was thought that Miles Valent had been murdered in the warmth of a flat or house near the waste ground, and that after Miles Valent had been murdered, that the murderer had kept his body warm in some way, such as covering it up with blankets. It was additionally noted that the tramp that had found Miles Valent's body had said that it had been a cold night. However, it was also reported that his cause of death was strangulation by a cloth-like ligature, and that very violent pressure had been used, resulting in his skin being pinched in, and that an impression had been left on his neck by the silver chain carrying a Roman Catholic medallion that Miles Valentine had always worn. The pathologist noted that the marks were extremely deep on the front, but practically non-existent at the back. The pathologist said it was a garroting mark, not a suspension mark, and added that it would have been impossible for it to have been self-inflicted. Police took samples of soil from the plot and also carried out house-to-house inquiries. His father said, "I understand that when he was found there was a piece of rope round his neck." His mother, who had been to identify Miles Valentine, said, "I had to see him for one last time." It was reported that his body had been found on the rubble of the demolished vicarage, and at the inquest heard that his body had been found on a dirty mattress. It was also reported that the police were hunting a maniac child killer and made references to another Straffen, who was said killed for the sake of killing. It was reported that a bell that could have been used to murder Miles Valentine was found in a dustbin by detectives on Thursday, 3 September 1959. A woman that lived in Tavistock Road recalled that she had seen a dark-skinned boy, thought to have been Miles Valentine, who was Anglo-Indian, playing on the vicarage side on the Thursday. The bicycle shop had been in Whitehorse Road, Croydon, and it was said that when he left it, that he was seen to meet another boy of about the same age with whom he went off with, and the police said that they were interested finding the other boy. The police said that they thought that Miles Valentine and the boy had spent some time together after leaving the cycle shop, and that he might have valuable information concerning the murder of Miles Valentine. An assistant at a cycle shop in High Street, Croydon, that was shown a photograph of Miles Valentine said, "I remember the boy coming in just after 2 o'clock yesterday. He stayed for about 20 minutes and looked at some bicycles." He was also quoted as having said, "The boy came into the shop about 2 p.m. and stayed for about 20 minutes. He was looking at the bicycles and I gave him a catalogue. He said he was going to choose a red sports cycle which we had in the shop. He talked to me for some time before he left, and I am certain there was no one with him. He was a bright, cheerful lad." It was later reported that the police were trying to trace two frightened little boys, who they said they thought could give vital clues in the hunt for the strangler. They were the boy that had been seen outside a cycle shop where Miles Valentine had called on the Thursday, and who was seen talking to a foreign-looking man. It was said that a passerby had told the police that he had overheard part of the conversation, and that it seemed as though the man was trying to lure the boy away, and that the boy seemed very frightened. The second scared boy was a boy that had been seen talking to Miles Valentine outside another cycle shop. The police addressed an assembly of pupils at Miles Valentine's school on Thursday, 10 September 1959, and appealed for the two frightened boys to come forward, noting that if they were there in the assembly that they should come forward. The police also appealed for any of Miles Valentine's friends that might have played with him after 1 p.m. on the day he was murdered to come forward. The police also asked 1,000 school children to help them in their inquiry, and showed his photograph to the pupils at 5 schools that were within a half-mile radius of the demolished vicarage where his body was found. The police said that they thought that some of Miles Valentine's friends might hold a vital clue as to his murder, but said that they had been unable to contact all of them because of the holidays. It was reported that the police had several theories regarding his death: that he was the victim of a man, and that he had been killed for pleasure; that he had been taken to a flat or house locally, murdered, covered up, and then carried back to the old vicarage and dumped; that he had been taken away by someone in a car and murdered and then returned to Croydon and dumped in the derelict garden of the old vicarage; that he had died during a rough game with some other children in which a belt or piece of rope had been pulled tight round his throat; that he was attacked by a gang of young hooligans; that he had been strangled by a jealous teenager; that he was a victim of the cult of thuggery, an ancient Hindu secret society. It was also reported that a mystery man, aged about 55, had been seen talking to a boy, thought to have been Miles Valentine, outside a cycle shop in Croydon. The man was seen by a 65-year-old compositor that had lived in Foxen Lane in Caterham. He said, "I heard the man talking to the boy. He more or less offered to buy him a bicycle. He was obviously a stranger to the lad, who seemed frightened of him. I have given the police a description of the man." It was said that after that incident, that Miles Valentine had then gone into 2 more shops to inquire about bicycles, but it was thought that the man might have followed him. Another report stated that the police were trying to trace a tall, gone, very unkempt sort of man that had sent Miles Vallint into a shop to buy clothesline on the Thursday afternoon. The man was seen by the owner of a hardware shop in Whitehorse Road, Croydon. She said that when she saw Miles Vallint's photograph in the newspaper that she recognized him as a boy that had been in her shop on the afternoon of 27 August 1959 and asked for a length of rope. She said that the boy had been very vague about what sort of rope he wanted, but eventually took a plastic clothesline to the door of her shop and showed it to somebody, and that he then came back and said, "We'll take the plastic one," and then paid 4s11d for it. However, it was noted that the woman had given a different statement at first, saying in her first statement that she had, after hearing of Miles Vallint's murder, that she had been exercising her dog at about 11 p.m. on the Thursday, when she had noticed a man on Spurgeon's Bridge who had been staring down St. James Road and ignoring the barking of her dog. However, on 7 September 1959, she made another statement after seeing Miles Vallint's photograph in the newspaper, referring to him as having come into her hardware shop and buying the washing rope. She said that the man was just very untidy and unkempt, not a tramp, but just rough. She further added that there had been another small boy with Miles Vallint and the man. When the woman was asked whether she had seen the man that had been with the boy before, she said yes, but when she was asked whether she had seen him since, she replied no. His post-mortem showed that he had been strangled with a scarf, necked or a similar cloth-like ligature. However, the police said that they thought that it was possible that Miles Vallint had been strangled somewhere else and then dumped on the waste ground. They said that it was possible that he had been picked up by somebody in a car, and that after he was killed that they then threw his body over the fence into the abandoned garden, where it was found in a weed-covered plot. They were also reported as having said that they had decided that Miles Vallint's body had been carried to the spot where it was found. On Thursday, 3 September 1959, the police said, "We have a theory that somebody may have information about the boy or some incident that may be linked with the crime, but is afraid to come forward. We are asking for the cooperation of the public in our inquiries, and we give an assurance that any information that is received by us will be treated in the strictest confidence. It is likely that the boy could have been killed elsewhere, perhaps in a house, and his body brought in a car and dumped after dark. It is now more or less certain that the last time that Miles was seen was between 2:45 and 3 p.m. on Thursday last. We think that after that time he was indoors somewhere." The police later asked residents in Tavistock Road whether they had seen anyone carrying a bundle after dark on the Thursday. They also toured the Croydon shopping centre and loudspeaker cars, asking for information. It was noted that the piece of waste ground had formerly been the garden of the old vicarage of St. James Church, but that the vicarage had been demolished about 3 months earlier. A local youth that did a milk round in the area said that he had recently been chased by a man. It was reported that the police had found no motive for his murder, with it being noted that the post-mortem had established that he had not been sexually assaulted and that there was no evidence of robbery. The police said, "So far, we have drawn a blank in our inquiries because we have not been able to establish a definite line to work on. The boy had not been criminally assaulted, so we can't say whether his killer was a sex maniac or not." The police later said that they thought that Miles Vallint's murderer lived locally and that he might strike again if he was not traced soon. On the weekend of 29-30 August 1959, a man walked into the police station in Andover, Hampshire and said, "I killed the Croydon boy." However, the police said that they found his story to be baseless. Miles Vallint had gone to the bicycle shop to look at bicycles because his father had promised him that he would get him one for his birthday, which was in 3 weeks' time. It was reported that he had wanted a new red and gold bicycle. Miles Vallint would have been 12 on 17 September 1959. The police questioned parents, asking, "Did your son badly want a bicycle?" stating that they thought that it was possible that such a boy might have come across Miles Vallint with his bicycle leaflets, and in a fit of jealous anger had killed him accidentally. Miles Vallint's mother said that Miles Vallint was always very obedient and punctual and always in at night by 5:30 p.m. She noted that his last words to her were, "Should I go and change first, mummy?" Noting that he was rather proud about his appearance and didn't think that his khaki shorts, red and white cowboy shirt and green woolen jacket were smart enough to wear in Croydon, but said that she told him not to bother. At the time he was murdered, it was said that Miles Valentine had been wearing his Lone Ranger shirt with a picture of a cowboy on it, khaki shorts and a green windcheater. Miles Valentin's mother added that Miles Valentine was always quiet and reserved and avoided the company of unruly boys, and very rarely went out by himself, and was not allowed to wander around at night, adding that in fact he was a little bit frightened of the dark. Miles Valentine had gone to a Roman Catholic school, St. Joseph's College in Beulah Hill. His funeral took place on Wednesday, 2 September 1959, with his service taking place at his school chapel and his burial at Croydon Cemetery. One of the wreaths at his funeral was formed in the shape of a bicycle. His funeral procession set out from his home in Farnley Road, South Norwood, for his school, St. Joseph's College in Upper Norwood, and it was reported that crowds lined the route. There were 13 cars in the procession, which was flanked by a police motorcycle escort. It was also reported that people in shops and factories stopped work to see the cortege pass on its way. His coffin was carried into the school chapel by 4 sixth form boys, and scouts from Miles Valentine's own troop, the 58th Croydon, formed a guard of honor. The small chapel was packed with more than 250 people for the Requiem Mass, and after the service, boys from his school lined one side of the road as his funeral procession moved to Croydon Cemetery. Miles Valentine was an Anglo-Indian and the eldest of 3 children, having an 11-year-old sister and a 3-year-old brother. He was born in India, but had come to Britain with his parents around 5 years earlier. Miles Valentine's father, who was Indian, had worked for a rubber company whilst in India and had been working as a foreman at a tire factory in England at the time of Miles Valentine's murder. Miles Valentine's mother was English. Miles Valentine's family had lived with Miles Valentine's grandmother, and there were 13 people living in the home. His family was described as a happy family. His 57-year-old grandmother said Miles was a very reserved boy. If there was any trouble or fights in the road, he kept out of them. Miles Valentine had only recently returned from a school holiday in Barcelona, Spain. His inquest on Saturday, 10 October 1959, returned a verdict of murder by a person or persons unknown. The police said that they had interviewed over 3,000 people, but had been unable to find a definite clue to work on. They said, "It appears to be a crime without a motive. The only thing we are fairly sure about is that the murder did not actually take place at the spot where the body was found. The boy was strangled elsewhere, and the body later dumped in the old vicarage garden." At the inquest, Miles Valentine's parents were asked whether Miles Valentine had been friendly with any colored person, and when they said no, the pathologist explained that, because of the way that Miles Valentine had been strangled, that he thought that there might have been some ritual significance. It was then suggested that Miles Valentine might have been the victim of a centuries-old religious cult, the cult of thuggery. It was reported that the CID were considering the possibility that Miles Valentine had been killed by thugs, and Miles Valentine's father was asked whether he had made any enemies in India before he emigrated. The coroner said, according to the pathologist, there is some significance in the form in which this strangulation was carried out. The police then said that they believe that Miles Valentine's murder might have been an echo of the age-old Hindu secret society practice of the thugs, which had been stamped out by the British in India more than a century earlier.
Number 2.
On January 3, 1981, in Burlington, Vermont, a lifeless, snow-covered body was discovered in the driveway of 62 Brooks Avenue. It was 35-year-old Angela Bellassai, shot to death and left in sub-zero temperatures and frozen to the ground. 40 years later, her killer has not yet been found. Belisle was spotted by a University of Vermont student who happened to be walking by her home. At first glance, the student thought it was a mannequin, but at second glance, saw it was human remains, and called the police. Since her death appeared to be a homicide, Mark Keller, the Chittenden County State's attorney at the time, headed to the scene. It was very done in the wintertime, and it was very cold, and there was no exchange of DNA between the assailant and person, because there is no contact between them, said Keller. If the gun had been found, the bullet could have been tied to the gun. We had no scientific evidence to support it. Williston Chief of Police, Patrick Foley, was a detective for the Burlington Police Department at the time of the crime and said he remembers the scene as if it was yesterday. There are certain things you always remember. I can see where that body was every time I talk about it. I can close my eyes and tell you how she was laid out on the ground, said Foley. At first, detectives believed Angela Bellassai had slipped and fell hitting her head, but Foley said he knew this was a homicide. It appeared as if she stepped out of her vehicle, that she might have lost her balance and fell and banged her head and pretty much froze to death, said Foley. We cleaned off the body and we noticed that initially it looked like a freckle or like a mole, but we saw the blood and we knew it was not a fall based on the evidence seen. Since this case is still open and being actively investigated, Foley could not release the details of the evidence found at the scene. However, based on evidence that was located near her body, Chief Foley said this crime was extremely personal. And that person who did this crime knows what I am talking about when I say it's personal, said Foley. Angela was recently divorced and a mother of 3 children. Foley said detectives interviewed a lot of people, including her ex-husband. Foley said, "He was not my first interview, and you are trained to look at people's eyes and look at their mannerism. You look at people's eyes and see there is something that's not being truthful, and you just couldn't and didn't have that thing that you need to say, hey, I know you did it," said Foley. Another person questioned by police committed suicide shortly after being interviewed by police. Not only was Angela a mom, but she was also a school teacher in St. Albans. While she taught children at St. Albans Elementary, she pursued her master's in psychology at the University of Vermont. On the night of the crime, Angela had met with her ex-husband in a UVM parking lot to drop off their children as they were spending the night with their father. She then headed to the grocery store, pulled into her driveway, and that's where her life ended. We felt the assailant was known to the person, or she was targeted. It did not appear to be a random act. Because of the footprints, it appeared that this person basically was a line in wait for her to come home, waiting by the garage, and as the car came in, the lights go out and this person moved to position, and she was shot. Nothing was taken from her, it was directly towards her, said Keller. If you have any information regarding this case, contact the Burlington Police Department or the Vermont State Police. Somebody who is watching this and has knowledge of it, it's time to bring closure and give peace to the family of Angela and the children, said Foley.
Number 3.
One night 13 years ago, Silene Eaddy left her family's Hopkins home to walk around the corner to a neighbor's house. She never came home. The 15-year-old's battered and burned body was found 2 days later on April 17, 2004, lying face down in a wooded area near Montgomery Lane and Pincushion Road in Lower Richland. Firefighters responding to a brush fire early that morning found the teen as they fought the blaze. There have been no arrests in the killing, which was turned over to the Richland County Sheriff's Department's cold case unit. "It's never gonna be easier, because I don't know what happened," said Celine's mother, Brenda McCoy. "Now, if I find out what happened, then I can kind of rest my mind." McCoy initially was a foster mother to Celine, who was known by friends and family as Erica, and adopted the girl when she was 3 years old. "With her being as small as she was, I didn't want her to go from house to house," said McCoy, 65. "I wanted her to have a stable home." Erica loved to dance and sing, and was part of a community gospel choir. McCoy tried to give her a stable home, but said the girl wanted to find her biological mother. Erica was a sweet child, but a lost child, McCoy said. She was trying to find her family. She always wanted to know where they were. We couldn't find them. We didn't know where to look. Friends would confide in Erica for advice, and while she was good at giving advice, she wasn't good at living that advice she gave, McCoy said. The death of McCoy's husband, Fred, when Erica was younger had a devastating effect on the girl. That was her best friend, McCoy said. When she lost him, it was just over. McCoy thinks this was partly the reason Erica ran away from home on several occasions and started hanging out with certain groups of people. She, evidently, was hanging out with the wrong people, which we found out to be many, said Gene Mincy, one of 4 cold case investigators assigned to Erica's case. Her mother really loved her. She was trying to help her. Investigators, along with McCoy, believe Erica knew who killed her. Mincy said soot was found in her airways during an autopsy, indicating she was alive and breathing when she was set on fire. Part of the killer's reasoning for setting the fire probably was to cover evidence, Mincy said. The other part of it was just to be mean. Detectives found tire tracks at the scene, Mincy said. They are following several leads but still need people to come forward with tips. We want to try to help the family and give them some kind of closure, he said. Her adoptive mother will never have closure. You can never completely get it out of your mind. McCoy says she has tried to stay strong while raising Erica's younger siblings, Eugene and Estony, who are now 23 and 16, respectively. Still, she wants to know who killed her oldest child, and why. The only thing I can do is wait and hope the police find something out or catch who did it, she said. I may be dead and gone when it happens, and it may not happen. Even if an arrest is made, McCoy said, forgiving the killer or killers might not be possible at this point. They took a part of me, and they did it, and left her there, she said. Anyone with information on Silene Eaddy's death, or her whereabouts between the evening of April 15, 2004, and April 17, 2004, is asked to contact the Richland County Sheriff's Department at 803-576-3000 or Crime Stoppers of the Midlands at 888 Crime South Carolina. Callers can remain anonymous and may be eligible for a reward of up to $1,000.
Number 4.
On May 8, 1996, 46-year-old Dr. Tsunao Saitoh and his 13-year-old daughter Lauli returned to their home in San Diego, California around 11 p.m. from the research lab at UCSD, where Tsunao was a well-respected research neuroscientist. When their car pulled up to the front of their house, unknown person or persons ambushed the two in the driveway. Tsunao was killed and slumped over in the car, and Lauli had run a short distance away before being shot and killed. Neighbors heard the gunshots and passers-by found the bodies a short time after the shooting. The crime happened in a house that was worth $800 25 years ago. La Jolla is a very exclusive neighborhood. UC San Diego is near La Jolla, but most research scientists cannot afford to live there because they don't earn that much. Tsunao could because his wife claims she comes from a very rich Japanese family. They were both originally from Japan, but his wife had made a number of real estate investments in San Diego. Apparently co-workers describe him as divorced, or at least getting a divorce. His wife was visiting the French Riviera at the time of the murders. She denied there were any marital problems, but she reported that they had purchases, a one-bedroom condo nearby, so he could have some peace and quiet and practice his yoga. She suggested people thought they were separated because of the condo. Apparently there was some allegations that he was having an affair with someone at work, but I couldn't find any verification. The murders occurred just as he pulled into his driveway. He was apparently shot 4 times. His body was slumped against the steering wheel. I couldn't find out if he was shot through the front or side window, or possibly his open door. Lauli ran from the car, but was shot 3 times. I could find out where she was shot, or how far she had gotten. The police were apparently impressed by the shooter's marksmanship, and thought it was suggestive of a hired hitman, but they could find nothing in his background to explain it. Tsunao was involved in Alzheimer's research, and he was pretty well known in his field. Colleagues didn't think professional rivalries of disputes over funding could have been the motive. We know nothing about the Wiff's family's source of wealth, but obviously any prospective divorce that involved a lot of property would provide a good motive for murder. However, you would not expect her or her family to want the child killed. If the wife were involved, and she has never been named a point, I can think of a few scenarios that could explain the daughter being killed. The killings happened at 11 p.m. when they arrived back after apparently spending the evening at his lab working on a school project. This is a little unusual but certainly possible. A hitman may not have expected his daughter to be with him that late, or assume she was his girlfriend. Perhaps the plan was to take out any and all witnesses. You would expect a wife, hiring a hitman to kill her husband, to take measures to protect a child who might be with him. Still, people do make mistakes, even when committing a murder. The wife claimed that she had purchased the real estate with her money she got from her family, but it is quite common for Asian immigrants to serve as shadow buyers so that wealthy people back home could move their money to the U.S. Such arrangements require a great deal of trust, and when trust is breached, murders are not unheard of. Tsunao would have a claim of half of any assets as community property under California law. If he were to die, his daughter would become the beneficiary of his estate. If the couple were shadow buyers on behalf of someone back in Japan, that person could see a divorce as a threat to their investments and may have taken matters into their own hand.
Number 5.
State police have renewed calls for help to solve the 1983 sex-related slaying of a 15-year-old Steventown youth. Robert Gutcase vanished in June 1983. His badly decomposed body was found 8 days later off East Road in Steventown. The death 33 years ago was highlighted in a news release Tuesday that asked for the public's help solving the cold case. Social media is a new venue being used to seek information on the old cases, state police said. Action in Gutcase case does not reflect new leads in the investigation, said Trooper Mark Sepiel, a spokesman for Troop G. Rather, it is the latest cold case the state police have posted their Facebook page. The troopers began posting cold cases on social media earlier this year. Because this is something we'll be doing indefinitely, we selected the ones that involved children first, Sepiel said. Gutcase left for his first day of work as a berry picker at Peace Farm in Steventown on June 30, 1983. After working for 2.5 hours that afternoon, he left on foot, heading north on State Route 22. The boy promised his supervisor he'd return for his paycheck that evening but never did. At 10:40 p.m., his mother, Grace Gutcase, reported her son, known as Bobby, had not returned home. A missing person investigation was started, but interviews and organized searches didn't lead to the teen. A week later, a foul odor on a logging road about 7 miles from the teen's home was reported to the state police. The next day, July 8, 1983, Gutcase's body was found. His death was ruled homicide and police suspect that he was sexually abused, but the killer or killers of the teen were never arrested. The public can call state police at 518-783-3211 with information.
Number 6.
In 1919, 23-year-old Thekla Gerken, who was a schoolteacher from Woonsocket, South Dakota, and was staying at the home of Dr. H. Hagedorn at 1017 Jones St. She was friends with H. Hagedorn's wife and was taking her vacation here. On the night of June 27, 1919, Thekla and another girl, Mabel Houlihan, who she also knew, went on a walk. The girls would say their goodbyes as they neared 8th St. Mabel would walk towards her home on 9th St. and Thekla would cross the intersection of 9th and Jones St. diagonally. Mabel was almost to the alley when she heard Thekla scream, "Mabel, come back," which was followed by a gunshot. Mabel would rush to her friend. She said there were people on the street who pointed towards her friend, who was now laying on the ground. She had blood coming from her mouth and had been shot in the chest. All that was known was that Thekla had been shot by a young man. She was seen talking to the young man, and the witness claimed they heard her say, "George, why did you do that?" They were too far away to hear anything else of the conversation. He had shot her with a .38 caliber gun and fled down an alleyway. One article stated that someone chased after him, but could not catch up to him and lost him. Thekla was new to town and only knew very few people, let alone have enemies. The two girls did meet a couple of young men the day before and set a date for that day, but did not show up to it. It's unknown if her killer was one of these men. It's suspected that the man who Thekla was talking to for a brief moment before her death was a poorly dressed man that she and Mabel had passed by earlier. Police believe it could have been possible that it was a woman disguised as a man. The man or woman was never found, and Mabel's case will remain unsolved.